The movie begins in outer space where a man is in his ship descending at high speed toward the Earth. He informs the control center that his parachute isn't working as he goes down. Suddenly, he looks through the window, his eyes wide with shock. The scene changes, and we're introduced to Jeanne, a psychiatrist who is good at her job. While watching TV about the upcoming manned mission to Mars, Jeanne gets a call and is asked to be the 8th member of the team. 10 months later, the mission is well underway after the launch, and the crew has gotten accustomed to their new living situation. 24 hours before their landing, Captain Martin gives the crew a short briefing and calls up William, the man funding the project, up front so he can give the team a short speech. Following an inspiring conversation, William informs the crew that an American shuttle successfully reached Mars 2 weeks before their arrival. The team is taken aback upon learning that their rivals managed to complete the journey in under 3 weeks, surpassing them in the process. William explains that Earth hadn't heard from the American crew except for a short video warning them not to come to Mars. Martin tells the team that their mission is now to rescue the stranded Americans and find out what happened to them. The following day, the crew is ready to make their Mars landing with their suits on. Martin attempts to detach the ship from the main craft, but it seems the holding gear is jammed. While attempting to release it manually, Martin accidentally loses his hold and floats out into space. Although shocked by the unexpected incident, the crew has no choice but to leave him because of the lack of fuel. The crew manages to safely land on Mars, but they are troubled to hear that Irene, the ship's AI system, is not coming online, which controls their life support system. If they are unable to get the AI up and running, the crew will die in 24 hours. Episode 2. The episode begins by showing us Ivan, the mastermind behind the company Zillion and the American space mission, giving a speech to a crowd of people in a seminar, telling them that the Mars mission will take place in a few months. The scene changes, and we are brought to the present where Ivan is in a hospital bed, severely sick. On Mars, the crew is trying to find a way to survive after they find out that the ship had burned most of the fuel and burned a battery during the landing. Simon suggests they'd find the American ship that landed before them and use theirs instead. Simon, Jeanne, and the crew's geologist, Eva, head out in search of the Z-1 shuttle. After driving around for a while, the group finds the shuttle but is surprised to see that it is wrecked and decides to look for solar panels instead of batteries. After walking around for a bit, the group finds one of the panels and contacts the rest of the crew in the ship who are attempting to fix Irene's system. On their way back to the ship, Jeanne notices an astronaut on the ground, and the group breaks him back to the shuttle. When they reach the pressurizing chamber, Jeanne refuses to let them in because the depressurizing process could finish the oxygen. While Simon is yelling at him to open it, the astronaut they had saved comes to and Irene's system simultaneously begins to work. Hurrying to the door, Alexander opens it for the group. Once the doors are open, the team takes the man they saved to the medical room. While Alexandra does his checkup, Simon asks the man, who introduces himself as Vladimir, and tells them that he is a Russian astronaut chosen to lead the space mission. Although the man tells them that he was born in the 1920s, Vladimir looked no older than 40. Jeanne asks Vladimir some questions and finds out that he thinks he is in a different era. Finding the man suspicious, Simon has Alexandra send pictures of Vladimir to Earth and finds out the man is telling the truth, being informed that he had died in 1967 and would have been over 90 if he had survived. Episode 3. After the strange discovery, the team gathers to discuss how a man who died half a century ago could be with them. William jokingly tells the group that Vladimir could be a time traveler or an alien, and admits that it might be the greatest discovery they have ever made. Jeanne points out that it was strange that they found the man with a full tank of oxygen when he claimed to have been from a different era. As the crew psychologist, Jeanne brings him food and speaks to Vladimir about his situation, telling him that he had died a hero. Although he listens to her intently, Vladimir has a hard time believing what she's saying. The following day, the crew is shocked to find that Vladimir had disappeared from the medical room, where they had been quarantining him. Simon, William, and Jeanne take the rover and head out to find the Russian man. While the group is searching, they get a call from Alexandra telling them that Earth has sent Vladimir's DNA analysis and is surprised by how strange it is. Alexandra tells the team that Vladimir isn't human. Despite Jan's constant urging to return to the ship, the group sees Vladimir from afar and goes toward him. The group finds the man standing next to what looks like a stone artifact. Getting closer, Jeanne asks Vladimir what the object is, and he repeats a saying her father used to frequent. He tells her that Mars delivers. Seeing something on top of the stone object, Jeanne reaches out and picks it up. Episode 4. Back on Earth, Ivan's doctors inform him about the man who was found on Mars who had been thought dead for the past 50 years. They hypothesize that the man must be an advanced AI and tell him that it could be an answer to his sickness. The crew brings Vladimir back to the ship and questions him only to find out that he didn't know how he was able to open the doors and arrive at the place they found him. Irene analyzes the object that Vladimir was standing next to and finds out that the design was an accumulation of different civilizations on Earth. When they are alone, Jeanne questions William about why he was not astonished by the discovery, but he ignores the question, making her suspicious of his true intentions. Simon and Jeanne are sitting in the control room when they notice another spaceship enter the atmosphere. A few minutes later, they establish communications with the ship and find out that it was another craft sent by Ivan. After telling them they would be in touch after they do their routine checks, the new ship ends the call. Hearing the communication, William tells the crew not to inform the newcomers about Vladimir. In hopes of keeping Vladimir's existence a secret, they have him wear one of their uniforms. A few minutes later, the men arrive unexpectedly holding a gun around their waists. The leader, Edward, asks them to return the black box that was found by the first ship's wreckage and leaves with it after explaining that he will return soon. After the visitors leave, Jeanne calls a team meeting to share what Eva and Basil have discovered about the stone artifact and Vladimir. She explains that the extra DNA found inside Vladimir was the same as the material the artifact was made out of. Hoping to get more information, Jeanne hypnotizes Vladimir and begins to ask him questions while the rest of the team watches through the monitors. Suddenly, the lights start to flicker and they lose sight of the TVs. Panicking, Simon rushes into Jeanne's room only to find Vladimir and her kissing. Angry, Simon punches Vladimir in the face. Episode 5. Jeanne wakes up in her bed after having a strange dream about Vladimir. Going to the common area, she asks Simon what had happened and receives an explanation. He also tells her that they found her in a strange state and forbids her from speaking to Vladimir again. A few minutes later, the crew receives visitors from the new ship. Once they're inside, William introduces Gemma, half of the brains of the Zillion Company. After apologizing about what happened with the soldiers earlier, Gemma introduces Alan, the inventor of the Zillion shuttles, and tells them that he can help fix their ship. While Alan is taking a look at the shuttle, William tells Gemma that they have found an artifact made of a special alloy. Studying the information on the screen, Gemma suggests that it might be data stored inside the DNA, which gives Basil a realization. The two work out the data processing of the DNA in Basil goes to inform William. He then shows him a copy of the black box they had found on the crashed ship and shows him footage of the Americans capturing and torturing Vladimir for information. As soon as the first punch was thrown, the camera inside the ship and the air had cut out, killing them all. Basil presents his theory to William that Vladimir might be controlling the craft. While she is sitting in her cabin, William arrives and tells her that he had known about the artifact they found for 4 years, explaining that having her on the team was not accidental, but that it was made because the electromagnetic pulses created an image of her face during recruiting. After he leaves, Jeanne remembers what Vladimir had told her about waiting for her for millions of years and how special she was. In hopes of finding more information, Jeanne gets dressed in her suit and leaves the ship. Episode 6. On Earth, Ivan is lying in his quarantine hospital bed and getting a report about Vladimir. Since his body is dying, he had planned to transfer his consciousness into the organic computer that is Vladimir. Ivan tells his scientists that he is willing to take the risk the process might cause. Back on Mars, Simon finds out that Jeanne has left the ship and tries to follow her, but is stopped by Jeanne. Unable to do anything about it, Simon begs her to come back in one piece. In the common room, Basil informs the crew that Irene is unexpectedly programming herself. When he asks the AI what she is doing, Irene explains that she is evolving. After Gemma makes it clear that she will take Vladimir, William and Simon decide to kidnap her in hopes of keeping the two soldiers from attacking them. Dressing up in their suit, Simon takes Gemma out and leads her away from the ship. Jeanne hears that Simon has left the ship and gets angry, thinking that he has abandoned them. While Jeanne and William are arguing, Eva interrupts them, telling them that they have company. When Edward arrives with his partner, Jeanne lets them in despite his teammates' constant warning. Pushing his way in, he finds Vladimir in the medical room, but before he can grab him, the ship's light goes out as Basil reboots Irene. When the lights come back on, Edward sees that Vladimir is gone. In the control room, Basil checks on Irene's system and realizes the reboot has failed. He and William are then forced to join the others by Edward's partner. Outside the ship, Jeanne has been walking around for hours. For a second, Jeanne is distracted and loses her footing, which causes her to fall down a hill. Episode 7. The episode begins in 1967, when Vladimir is waiting for his best friend Yuri, the world-known astronaut, on a park bench. When he arrives, Yuri explains to his friend that he is being considered for the next mission. He then continues to explain his experience in space and tells Vladimir that he too would be world-known because although he was only able to stay in space for an hour, Vladimir would be there the whole day. In the present, Jeanne wakes up after having a dream about her father and finds herself out in Mars' barren land and sees that her leg has been stuck under a rock from the fall. At the ship, Edward and his partner have looked around the ship for Vladimir, but the man is nowhere in sight. After threatening the crew members, Edward has Basal call Simon by threatening to beat him up. When they finally get in contact, Edward insists that Simon let him talk to Gemma. The woman tells Edward to wait for her as long as it takes and continues forward with Simon as they have gotten a radio call from Jeanne expressing her troubles. In the other room, Basal gets a message from Vladimir expressing that he has replaced Irene as the ship's AI system for the time being. He tells him that he is more than a machine but Mars itself. As they're gathered in the common space being watched by Edward and his partner, Basal is finally able to get the systems back online. Looking at his monitor, he is startled to notice that there is a type of storm headed their way. Panicking, Edward tells Alan that they need to get back to their ship and leave the planet, abandoning Gemma. As Alan struggles against the man, the light goes off once again, revealing Vladimir standing behind them as they come back. Coming closer to Edward, he asks him to take him back to Earth. Out in the open, Jeanne keeps going in and out of consciousness, dreaming about her departed father. Suddenly, she hears Simon's voice and is happy to see him. Episode 8. Simon and Gemma manage to free Jeanne's leg from the trap, and the three head back to the ship. On their way back, Jeanne discloses that Vladimir had chosen his appearance because he knew she would come and her father used to tell her stories about the great astronaut who sacrificed himself for his best friend Yuri. Jeanne also reveals to Gemma that she knows they had come to Mars to take Vladimir, to use his knowledge so they can save Ivan. After walking for a while, they arrive at a large structure that leads into what looks like a man-made cave. Inside, the group is surprised to see flowing water. Jeanne is sure they're heading the right way and knows that Vladimir led her there for her to see something important. Continuing deeper, Jeanne and the others are shocked to find thousands of skulls embedded inside the walls and realize that it was Martians who colonized Earth in the first palace. Back on the ship, Edward decides it is time for them to go, but Jeanne begs them to take him with them as well. Edward refuses, telling him that there is no room for him. Upset, Jeanne takes out a gun and remembering a secret conversation he had with Vladimir. He shoots him in the chest simultaneously, making Jeanne collapse in the caves. Startled, Simon begins to give Jeanne CPR and revives her. Gemma abandoned the two in the caves and called Edward for updates. When she heard the Russian was dead, she told him to take the body back to the ship and kidnap Jeanne because the two were somehow connected. Getting her up, Jeanne and Simon continue their journey forward into an opening they see up front. When they go through, the two are shocked to come out into a landscape and environment that resembles Earth. Episode 9. On the ship, Adam, Edward's partner, is getting Vladimir's body ready for transport. When he tells him it's time to go, Alan refuses, telling the man that he isn't going to abandon the people on the ship. William manages to sneak out of the spacecraft and tracks Simon to the cave, emerging on the other side. On the other side of the entrance, William finds Simon and Jeanne standing next to Vladimir and is shocked to see him still alive. After telling them what happened, William looks around and explains that they must be in Mars' North Pole, 1,000 miles from the ship. Vladimir reveals that it was their species that created him millions of years ago. He tells them that the inhabitants of the planet died out and the ones who survived fled to Earth. Whispering, Vladimir tells Jeanne that it is up to her to decide whether her species deserves another chance or if they need to die out. While they're conversing, Edward appears and shoots William in the leg, forcing Jeanne to come with him. While she is being threatened, Jeanne asks Vladimir for help and he cuts off Edward's oxygen supply, letting him suffocate to death. Back at the ship, Alan tries to sedate Adam to give them more time, but the trained soldier overpowers him. While Adam is threatening the rest of the group, he hears someone in the depressurizing chamber and goes to check it out. When he gets there, he is unexpectedly attacked by Jeanne, who manages to beat the man unconscious. As he is trying to catch his breath, Alexander appears and closes the door to the chamber. While he yells for her to open the door, Alexandra looks at him in resignation and opens the outside door, letting Jeanne suffocate to death. Episode 10. Jeanne and Simon carry William back to the ship before his suit loses more oxygen due to the tear. While Alexandra takes care of William's leg, Simon sees Jeanne's fallen body and asks the group what had happened. Alexandra, looking at him sternly, tells him that Jeanne had sacrificed himself for them. Inside the American ship, Gemma decides to take off without the others because they haven't made it there in time and the storm is only 50 minutes away. She sends a message to Ivan informing him of her plans, promising that she has enough data to study. While she is about to leave, she gets an audio transmission from Simon who tells her that they were coming over and had Alan with them. When Gemma refuses to wait for them because she feels like she is betraying Ivan, Jeanne urges William to speak to her because they used to work together. William recounts why she had left him to work for Ivan 5 years ago and tells her that she was wrong about him, urging her to work with him to change the world like she had always wanted. After thinking about it for a few minutes, Gemma tells the crew to hurry up. After the group arrives at the ship and is strapped in for takeoff, Simon tries to launch the spacecraft, but they find out that Ivan had locked the launch system after receiving the message from Gemma. Sitting in the back, Jeanne remembers everything Vladimir had told her about how similar the two were. She remembers how his presence had made Irene work and decides to try it out. Concentrating on the system, Jeanne wills it to unlock and manages to override Ivan's restrictions. As the monitors show them that they have 3 minutes to launch, they see Edward approaching with a gun in hand. Although Simon tries to go out to stop Edward, he sees Jeanne on the monitor who shoots the soldier in the face. Simon tries to go out to retrieve Jeanne, but she tells him not to, explaining that it is already too late for her. With tears in his eyes, Simon watches Jeanne as the rocket launches and she waves goodbye. As they descend further from the planet, William notices the darkness in the North Pole and tells Simon that they must have not been there because it is night there. Back on Earth, Ivan is informed that the shuttle was able to launch despite his lockdown. Angry, he gets up from his chair shaking and decides to go to Mars himself.